So in light of the recent fiasco, shall we say, and considering the little bit of trouble World of Warships has found itself in over the past 4 years now, honestly it feels like every time I log onto Reddit and go to the World of Warships subreddit, there's either another disaster either waiting to happen or already happening. Kind of like those hurricanes that constantly hit the southern parts of the US. There's just another one always waiting to come along and destroy your faith or your sanity, or if you're lucky, both. So seeing as we're starting to emerge just from another semi-hurricane, I thought what better time to go over some of the things that I thought maybe, just maybe, could be improved upon in the game. But then again, why should a noob like me be listened to in terms of game development? It's like asking a lifeguard on Bondi Beach how to build an igloo when you're in a blizzard. Sure, they might be good at swimming, but they're not all that good when the water is frozen and needs to be molded into a building. So in that vein, let's go over some of the things that I think, with a lot of hard work, sweat and blood and tears, can be improved upon in World of Warships. Or another way of saying that could be that things that will never be implemented or improved in World of Warships. So at the risk of rambling, let's get into it. So first up on the chopping block is the idea of matchmaking. Matchmaking has a fairly controversial history with World of Warships, with some people saying it needs to be introduced into the game in order to solve the problem of games ending within the space of 3 seconds, while others saying that the game can't or doesn't need matchmaking in order to solve the issue of the everlasting potatoes. And well, I'm somewhat in two minds on this one. On the one hand, matchmaking would match people of similar skill up against each other, and perhaps, just perhaps, games would last a little bit longer. But at the same time, I can't help but think that if you're implementing a matchmaking system, it's going to mean two things. Players that are exceptionally good at the game, or even better than most players you meet, are going to have severely long queue times. And I'm not talking 5 to 10 minutes here, I'm talking multiple hours of queue times. And the reason I say this is because the game population is low enough that there just isn't enough players in order to fill the queue if skill-based matchmaking was introduced. The second point being that the exact opposite thing would happen at the other end of the player skill base. Those players that are potatoes, or significantly worse than your average player, will probably have not that long of queue times, perhaps even shorter than they are now. But when you look at the topic of matchmaking, it's generally the best players in the game making an argument in favour of it, which kind of boggles my mind. But I digress and leave further discussion for the comments. Well, let's get on to the next topic for consideration. So another way the game could be improved is through the incentivization of good play. You know, when your dog is going to the toilet inside the house, you incentivize them towards going to the toilet outside by giving them a treat every time they do. Not that I'm saying that the player base are dogs that defecate inside their own house, but maybe that analogy could have been a little bit better. Anyways, there's a couple of ways you could incentivize good play in World of Warships from the bottom up. Oh, and by the way, when I say good play, I don't mean non-toxic gameplay. I mean objectively good gameplay. The other problem is a whole other barrel of fish. So, one of the most suggested ways you could do this is by changing the way both XP and credits are earned within any given game. The game the way it is right now basically rewards doing damage, with a little bit of a less focus on capping. What this means is that things like spotting, tanking, and just generally more support aspects that still play a huge role in the outcome of a game are largely ignored when it comes to actually calculating rewards. Kind of like when you're a Formula 1 team and you spend all your development money on buying a really good driver and you have to end up putting them in a Hyundai because you forgot you need to actually build a car too. A resolution to this type of issue is like having slightly greater emphasis on things like spotting damage, especially for DDs, tanking damage, especially for BBs, and just adjusting the overall credit calculation system will be a great way to incentivize good gameplay within the game. So we touched on the aspects of matchmaking and how they can sometimes be good and sometimes bad for a game. And I suppose another suggestion that I would think would also improve the gameplay of some players would be longer ranked seasons, and seasons that don't just end when you reach rank 1. In this way you still have exceptionally good players playing against maybe those who aren't as good, and as the good old saying says, steel sharpens steel. But I've talked enough about the incentivization, and let's move on to the next issue. So much like the previous two topics that I've talked about, the game state has been talked about a hell of a lot, whether it be in YouTube videos, which even I myself have done besides others, Reddit posts, forum posts, and even live streams. Oh, and I live stream every weekday on Twitch from 1 PM GMT, so if you're free, come say hello. The gameplay might not be all that great, but hopefully the banter will be a bit better. But the point I'm trying to get across is much like a mother who's desperately trying to discipline their child while they're having a temper tantrum in the middle of a supermarket. You tell them that they're not going to get their favourite toy, but it just doesn't sink in. And similarly, you can talk about how the game state is still incredibly frustrating to play, but it just isn't getting through to the people making the decisions. So let's have a look at some of the characteristics of the game state the way it currently is. First, of the majority of games at least feel like they end extremely quickly, or at least are decided extremely quickly, which means that there is a large time sink for not all that much reward, kind of like queuing at a theme park for 2 hours for the new exciting roller coaster, only to figure out once you get to the front of the line that you're actually in line for the teacups. Sure, you'll still enjoy them a bit, but they just aren't anywhere near as good as the roller coaster. Secondly, the rate of grinding is extremely quick. What this means is that in order to go from tier 2, 3 or 4 all the way up to tier 10 battles, it takes a very short period of time, because honestly you only really need to get to tier 8 to do good in tier 10 battles, and as a result you have a lot less than good players, through no fault of their own, being put against players that they have no right being put up against, which ultimately feeds into the first issue of the game's ending really quickly. So I would be useless if I didn't at least attempt to provide some solution to all these issues I've pointed out. So, due to the fact that the second issue basically feeds into the first, then let's go over what possibly fix this grinding problem, and as a result create more equal and enjoyable games at tier 10. Firstly, the grind is extremely easy to pay your way through. Now this isn't a shot at whales, as they are basically the people that keep the lights on for World of Warships, but incentivizing this type of behaviour, I'm basically saying that you can get to tier 10 in something ridiculous like 22 games if you just attach all the flags, premium time and permacamos, or buy a certain ship, or Yamato. It's a really toxic output for the state of games for tier 8 through 10. And I might go out on a limb here and even say that the grind needs to be harder in order for players to get the required experience in order to play each ship in at least somewhat competent fashion. But let me know in the comments below if you agree, and if there's a suggestion here that you think would better fix this issue, make sure to let me know. Let's move on to the final problem I see with World of Warships. So the final issue, I thought I would take a little bit of a detour. This video has been a bit like going whitewater rafting. Sure, it's a bit bumpy and many of the issues have been difficult to go through, but with this final issue it's going to feel like the worst of the run down the river is done, only to find out that you're actually about to go over Niagara Falls. So what is the final issue, you ask? Well, it's none other than wargaming, and particularly World of Warships' absolutely abysmal public relations. If we cast our mind back to the days of Christmas 2019, you'll see that World of Warships' little hiccups, shall we say, all seem to follow a relatively similar pattern, and at this point I don't even want to blame the PR department. In all honesty, it seems to be an amalgamation of several departments basically creating this Frankenstein issue in the first place, with the PR department having to come and attempt to destroy it with a spoon, and mostly failing to, and sometimes actually making it stronger. So in what ways does this Puerto Rico disaster compare to that of the Santa containers this year? Well, it's simple. Misinformation. If there's one thing people, in general, hate more than anything else, and if we exclude being HE spammed by the Smolensk, then that just leaves being lied to. And sure, you could say that, well, just not stating the fact that it's basically impossible to grind to Puerto Rico without going 24/7 over the Christmas period is not lying, or not saying that you're basically only going to get Markovs in Santa containers is not lying either. Well, let me introduce you to the idea of lying by omission. It's like someone telling you that they're going to go fishing and then casually mention that they're going to throw a tank into the sea, and then when the police come and ask you about a missing tank and what your friend was doing that day, you say he went fishing. Yeah, you still end up in jail for lying. And similarly, lying by omission in World of Warships just generates even more anger in the community when it happens. Now, to Wargaming's defense, the Santa container issue was handled slightly better than last year's Puerto Rico blow up, but I mean, you couldn't get much worse than that, to be perfectly honest. So what do Wargaming and World of Warships as a whole need to do in order to correct this? Just be honest with the people you're making the game for. I honestly don't care if the game wants to make money on everything they can. Just give us the information in order to make an informed decision, and I'll be 100% okay with it. The majority of the damage caused by these PR blow-ups is mostly due to the half-hearted lying. It just needs to stop, and of course, let me know down in the comments below if there's something you think I missed or another solution to this particular issue within the game. But that pretty much sums it up for another video. I'm aiming to have some higher quality content coming out from now on, and especially into the next year. So what that means is that less focus on actual gameplay and more rambling type videos like this one. Yay! If there's some other type of video you would like to see me make sure to let me know down below, so I guess there's that to look forward to. But as always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.